technical difficulties overcome. That makes me happy. Okay. So we're doing challenge 15. You have some images that you brought.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to go up to the top side here and click on the little green screen share button. And then whatever program or window you're using, just click on that so that we can see what you're looking at.
So let me start here. All right. So let's just get that full screen. And that one should be it. There we go. Have you got
that? You might have to take it out of full screen. All I'm seeing is like the top tag for.
No, it's not. It's not in. It's not in full screen. Hang on. Let's see. Okay. What can I see? Huh. It's actually not in full screen. Okay, let me try resizing it. See if that will get us where we need to be. Wow, that's no, there's something very screwy going on here.
Google is not our friend today.
Yeah, not today. Okay, let me try.
Are you sharing them just from the Google community?
Yeah. So I've got them here anyway. Let me pull the album up. Let's just stick a new folder in there, drag them in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right. Okay.
Can you see them on my screen okay?
Yeah, I can see them.
All right, these are what we're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll screen share them. See if we can overcome. Okay, so tell me a little about the image and what went into making it, what you were trying to accomplish, and then on a scale of 1 to 3, just tell me where you would grade it, with 0 being, why the hell would I bring this to critique, and 3 being, this is the best I have to offer.
Okay. Maybe it's worth tracking back a little to my last critique, which was actually level 5, and okay. You set me a few tasks. You said there are reasonably strong images there, but there's no sense of what made me as an artist and which ones were Julian's images. And you set me the task of going away and working out, looking at my portfolio and more broadly at images that I'd favorited, I'd liked and collected, and said, which ones really turn me on? Which ones, make my juices flow, make me wish I'd done that? And I found a few surprising things. I have to have something which I call the fly in the ointment. Like, there's a pivotal, usually small, odd element that makes the image work. And so there are landscapes that do that. Not very many. There's quite a lot of street photography that might do that. But increasingly, we've discussed this a few times, the fine art elements tend to have that in them, a quite well thought through composition. Okay. And separately, they're usually quite simple, strong compositions. And the second challenge you set me was to get familiar with Photoshop, because there are, even in really basic Photoshop, there are things I can do to enhance the images, take out extra features that don't really belong, that distract, etc. And you said most of your work is actually done in Photoshop, not Lightroom. So I've been focusing on that as well during these creating these images. So with this image, there are 3 out of the 5 are actually from this building, which is in Abu Dhabi. It's one of I think the largest mosque in the world, and it happens to be about a mile away from where I'm staying. And I thought, if there's anywhere that's going to be perfect to try and get some strong composition images for critique, it's there. So I went over there yesterday evening and got some pretty good shots. With this one, the light was, the sky was getting a bit overcast, so actually the light between the interior and exterior was getting quite balanced. And walking around, I saw, hey, there's a nice framing in this doorway of one of the domes there. I can capture a full tonality of, frankly, something that's white marble. The entire thing's made out of white marble. But looking at it, I thought, I need that extra element, and I had to wait about 5 minutes for someone appropriate, shall we say, to walk in. And it happened to be this young boy, about 12, 13 years old, I guess, in local dress. And it was one of those points where a couple of frames, and I got it. It was literally the last photo I took of the entire day, and I thought that is the one.
So how happy are you with this on a scale of 0 to 3?
For me, I'm comparing it to the only other image you ranked 3, which is my mountains picture. And I think compositionally, this is up there. It gives a sense of place. It gives a sense of light. The character in it, the individual in it, is obviously in keeping with the entire image. Minor nits I have with it. I wish I'd angled the camera up a bit more to capture a bit more of the arch, so I could correct a tiny bit more of the building sort of curving in. But all in all, I love the fact his robe echoes the moon at the top of the crescent at the top of the dome. I love the fact that the dome is perfectly centered in the archway, and it leads you in very nicely.
I agree. I go back and forth on it, and this is totally personal, on the long shadow theory with people, but I definitely think that it works here and adds to the grandeur and the length of just the expansive space that he's in. I love the sort of almost natural monochromatic feeling that we have to it, because everything's in shades of whites and grays, and they're kind of blending to more of the cooler tone scale. But then we have all this warmth that's radiating from your person, which definitely makes him the focal point, even though he's a very, very small percentage of the whole image. The lighting's beautiful. Whatever you did with the retouching is well done, because it doesn't look like it's retouched. So there's certain images, and plenty of mine can fall into this category, where we go, wow, the retouching is amazing on this. And that's like saying, wow, her makeup looks great, which is not what any girl wants to hear. But I agree with you. There's a lot of not symmetry, but repetitive visuals in the shapes of the buildings that are repeating throughout, and they even almost start to echo sentiment in the figure, just with his clothing and stuff. You have this sort of rounded top going through, so there's these themes that are going through visually in the shapes that I think are really strong with it. The only thing that pulls my attention is it looks like there's some kind of wooden door or something right off to the edge. I might go in and either crop it in just a little bit closer to cut that out, or take the color out of that just so that it doesn't distract from him. I don't know if you bring it over, if that'll sort of offset, because I do like the amount of space between him and the edge, but it might work. You might have to go in and actually crop in and up from the floor a little bit, just to bring him down so that he keeps the same sort of quadrant of space. But once you do that, I might decide I don't like that. But that's the only thing that really pulls my attention away from him. Really the only real critique that I have to offer. I might go in and just dodge and burn him just a little bit to see if I could pull up the light on him. I really want to be able to appreciate his face, and because he's walking away from the light, I feel like it kind of gets lost, like the flesh tones of his skin get lost in the color of the clothing. So if we could go in and just brighten that up like ever so slightly, just to give it just a little bit of punch, I think that might make it stronger. But it's definitely on scale, and I definitely see the sort of theme starting to emerge between small people in great places, which I think is a very, very strong visual metaphor as well. So I would agree with you. I think this one would score a 3.
Okay. I did try the cropping on the left, by the way, and he needed some space and, in fact, that archway to walk into. So I left it as is, but I didn't think about toning down the doorway.
Okay. Okay, so tell me about this one.
So this one is looking straight across the main plaza towards the main doors of the actual prayer hall, and this was almost the first shot I took as I walked in. I thought, that's great, but it needs this huge expanse of marble, you know, doorways. You've no idea of the sense of scale. It needs someone or something to show you what's going on. And this lovely lady walked in from the right in a hijab with a green headscarf to give an extra punch of color, and was photographing the doors. And I thought, a photo of 3 doors, and the fact that there's also 3 images of her. There's 2 reflections of her. One's underneath her, and there's a second one in the doorway, on the right-hand door. Which for me, I thought the repetitive. I call this triple/triple. Because I thought that was such a strong repetition, and for me, this is the strongest image in the 5 I've put forward.
I like this one as well. I agree with the triples, and the eye actually tends to see in sets of 3, so it works really well. I think if we weren't operating off of the symmetry, if the middle door was out and it was just the 2, and heard that she would actually get lost in it. So the fact that we view the window doors, the reflections, as one set of 3 allows us to then move on to her visually as the second in the series, and kind of severs her visually, which allows us to appreciate her. And I think that's really, really key when you're doing these kind of images, is finding a way that even though they're such a small, minuscule part of it, that they still become sort of the leading role of the image, and don't get overwhelmed by whatever the landscape is that they're in. And that definitely works here. I'm also a big fan of the contrasting elements between the warmth of the framing and design of the doors and the cool of the bricks or the stones. She works really well in it. I love the reflections. I'm always a big fan of playing with them. They're so close to symmetrical though, and the only one that really bothers me is the center door, because whatever's being reflected off of that is not taking up the same amount of space, but it is dead center between the doors, and it's off just a little bit. So the fact that it's making its way into certain fragments of the glass and not into others, that's frustrating me a little bit visually, but not enough to really ruin the image. And then it becomes a matter of, are these sort of photojournalist kind of images of different places you're going to, or do you want them to be super fine art where you have more ability to play? And that's going to be a personal decision for you, I think. But overall, this sort of, and even with the mountain picture that you brought to the first critique, you have this, not only like this we're so small in the grand scheme of the world theme going on, but you'd like your subjects to be dark little ants, and then these big expansive, for the most part high key kind of surroundings, which I think is interesting. And I don't know if you've noticed that yet, but it's definitely like a lighter kind of feeling of everything surrounding, and then her separate. I'm not a huge fan of her pose. It looks like she's holding a cell phone, maybe taking a picture as well, which is a little too modern for me to consider it fine art worthy, but at the same time, that might be personal prejudice coming in. But I think if she was just standing there and all, or if she was interacting, or she was running or playing or doing something else, that we would have more of a connection, because I think you know, very often we get caught behind our technology, and it creates these barriers to entry for everything else that the world is trying to give us to experience. So I might have waited another moment or two for her to change position. But again, I can't say that that's sound critique or just personal preference coming in. But this one works too. I'm not sure that you need all the negative space above it. On one hand, it kind of adds to the grandeur of the building. On the other hand, it's almost the top third of the image that's just kind of repetitive space and patterns, and I'm not sure it's adding. This might work better as like more of like a panorama kind of cut, where it's much more narrow in the height and just allows us to appreciate the doors and her. But again, that's something that, you know, we might crop it, and then I might decide that I like the other better, which is something that I'm always doing with my own images, going back and forth between different crops and settings to see what works. But either way, I do think that this is really strong as an individual image, and I do think that it's feeding very well into themes that I could very easily pick out as coming from the same photographer, which is good.
Good. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. The crop at the top, and the reason why I kept that was because there's actually this very fine marble tracery all over the doors, finishes just up at the top, and even with quite heavy-handed processing, I couldn't make it quite come out. So I may just give that up, emphasize it, and like you said, do a panorama crop.
Okay, now that I'm looking for it, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, I think if that was super prominent, that it would be really good, but I didn't catch it until you said it. Although it might be something that actually shows up better in print. Really, if you didn't get it and it's that light in the image and you've already gone over, short of tracing it on a separate layer with like either sort of dodging and burning with an overlay, or even with the paintbrush, like literally treating it like tracing paper and going over everyone, I'm not sure what you can do to pull it out more without it starting to affect the rest of the image. So that's for you to decide how much you love this and if it's worth that kind of time and energy.
All right.
Okay, tell me about this one.
So this one was walking around trying to find an angle on the outside of the mosque a couple of days ago, and came across the place I'm staying is stuffed full of these kind of Italian looking villas, and came across this beautiful pathway leading up to the mosque. Perfect framing. I'd just been watching Trey Ratcliffe's Becoming an Artist video series, and in the landscape series, landscape episode, he talks about having a landscape always with kind of a foreground that makes the viewer wanting to step in, a middle ground that they want to travel to, and a far distant background which causes the eye to go into the distance. And I was working on this scene, seeing how I could incorporate all of those, and rather than having the path down the middle, which was less strong, I kept these grasses in the front. And for me, this image very much sucks me in towards the background. And when I started looking at it and thinking, there is a huge contrast here between the buildings to the front, the nice lawns, the bushes, could be anywhere in Europe, and this almost floating castle, Arabic castle at the back. So what I did was very minimal processing over the front of the image, front and middle of the image, but at the back, I reduced the color balance a ton to emphasize the blue, bring out the blue in the sky as well, and went very carefully over the edges of the building and the trees to take it out. So it looked like the blue was almost ethereal and floating in the background. The other thing I had to do is this left-hand lamppost you see on the sort of upper thirds post had a huge lamp at the top and post, which went all the way up to the main dome and curved over in front of the right-hand dome. So that was a a decent amount of Photoshop to get rid of.
Okay. I can totally see the ethereal property of the castle in the background, and I think that's brought on by the fact that for the most part the walkway, street, and the houses are semi-modern and more traditional, and then you have this like expansive castle that looks very out of place behind it. Not what you would expect to see. It almost looks like it was composited in. And the coloring of it, the fact that it's sort of this cool blue monochromatic feel also lends to that again, which makes it all the more impressive that it's all one image. I do think that we start to lose a little bit of the potency. The other images that we looked at, I definitely would have grouped together from the same artist. I don't know that I would pick this one out necessarily. But I also think that we're only looking at a couple of images. So I think that we'll start to see different themes going back and forth. For example, the other two images that you brought were the same kind of style and location. I would probably pick this one out based on the castle. If we didn't have that in the background, I definitely wouldn't. Because we lost a few of the other themes that were floating through. So the retouching on the lamppost is really good, especially for just sort of really jumping in and getting your feet and the rest of your body wet with Photoshop. It's very well done. I wouldn't have known that if you hadn't said it. So I like this one, but I don't love it. It's not as strong as the other ones for me. It's a decent image. But even with this like amazing castle in the background, and the juxtaposition, it wouldn't stop me if I was scrolling through the news feed, which is like, you know, that's my new standard in the digital age, is that we're always in such a hurry and people just scroll and scroll and scroll until something grabs their attention. I don't know that this one would cause me to pause or slow down, even with that. So I would say a 2 for this one. It's still a good image. There isn't anything I'm looking at that's really technically wrong with it that I can like pull out and go, that's a no-no, and slap you on the wrist. But it also, I don't think, is saying anything really profound or really grabbing for me. It's a good image, but I want to be able to say more than it's a good image.
Yeah, it's missing. If it were more of my what seems to be my style, if it had a person in Arabic dress walking along the path towards it, it would nail it, I think.
Yeah, and that might be all that's missing from it. That might be like your unicorn, your little thing that you put in them that really sets it apart and creates the scale and the juxtaposition. That might be what's missing from it. I do like it, but it doesn't quite move me, which is what I'm looking for. That's where exceptional imagery comes in for me. Okay, tell me about this one.
So this one is a museum in London called the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it's all about style and art. And this is a large marble gallery just by the main entrance. And I stopped and looked at it and thought, actually, this could make a really great panorama, because trying to, even with a fairly wide-angle lens, getting the whole gallery in one shot is near to impossible. And I thought it's going to be one of my tests on how to use Photoshop as well, which I'd only done with a couple of layer masks, and I needed a project of some sort to get to grips with. And this was a hell of a project. So it ended up being a 13 image panorama, and when it was first spat out by Photoshop, actually by Lightroom, I looked at it and thought, hang on, there were some extra figures down at the front, like 2-3 extra people down at the front, and a couple of big brick structures like wells towards the front. But I started looking back and thinking, hang on, these guys, the first 3 figures that you see echo the statues they're next to. in a weird way. And then I looked back and thought, each of the people there almost looks like this could be composited in, almost like an artificial image. And I thought, well, can I straighten it out, the entire image out enough, and composite out the people at the bottom to make it look like it could be an architectural image done entirely in computer. And that took me 5 hours. So learning in very quick succession with Lee's help how to copy pieces of the floor over, how to brush through to them, how to straighten it using lens alignment tools. And it was something like 50 different alignment lines to get that floor even vaguely straight. And I look at it closely, and it's still not quite straight. But the overall effect here is you're looking straight into a very, a very not diagonal, but how would I call it? So a very square-on hall with no distortions to the edges to draw your eye away.
Yeah, it's so bonus points for Lee too, because I've been seeing him giving you lots of tips and links to help, which is awesome. I love when you guys are super helpful for each other and help each other grow. This image was totally worth the investment time. And again, the nice thing about the way that you retouch is that you can spend 4 or 5 hours on it, and to the untrained eye, especially looking at it, they'll think that you just got lucky and got this shot. It doesn't look like it's retouched, so it still has a very natural sort of simplistic feel, which I like. And usually I'm moved by very heavily retouched images, and I think that's from my painting background. So you're probably the first photographer I've had go through JLark that all of their images are very sort of natural and look like they would be straight out of camera, but still have an element that for the most part moves me in every single one, and this is definitely one of them. I love that a lot of the people that are in it look like they are posed and sort of follow the body lines and language of the sculptural architecture. It's really interesting. That being said, the only one that bothers me again are these cell phone takers right here. I think they're distracting from that. Like, if we stripped all these guys down and monochrome them, they would look like statues that were part of it. Even like when we get to the back and the people that are here, the way that they're standing and moving works really well. The only other thing is, again, we have this sort of symmetry going on with the center line and then down the sides, and you have all these lines leading in, and it's a little heavy on this side with how many people there are as opposed to this side, which means that on this side you're really paying attention to who's over here because they're not competing with everyone else, which are the only people that are throwing off this sort of emotive feeling. So I might actually I might want to go in here and take 1 or 2 of these people and just flip them and move them to this side just to sort of balance out. But again, that's a lot of imagery. But I don't necessarily think that that's necessary either. I think that the image works because it looks very natural. I love the light in it and what you were working with. It works. It really works. There's so much going on in this and so many different visual things to appreciate. And you usually don't get this kind of view of any kind of art gallery or museum or, like usually everybody's right at this level taking pictures of individual things. So the fact that you were able to capture this really works. I do see a bit of the wave in certain tiles, but I don't think that most people will notice that unless they're looking for it for critique. I definitely think that it works. So I don't think any of the things that you're seeing are worthy of any more time in post. I think it works just as it is right now. And I think I think it's really well done for as much as you did to straighten it out, because I don't know that I would have had the patience to do that.
I don't think I would have done either if I'd known how long it would take.
Okay, tell me about this one.
So going back to what I said about reviewing my portfolio and that of others, that something that makes an image for me is that fly in the ointment, and I specifically use that phrase in the post I put up in the community, and that got me thinking. Is like, well, let's turn this into a visual pun, visual demonstration of what I mean. And I'd also said that one of my inspirations is Mapplethorpe, who was famous in the 80s for doing these gorgeous black and white images of flowers and of people as well. So I thought, well, let's combine the two and see if I can do a Mapplethorpe type sort of fleshy, lush flower in black and white, but let's add in just a weird element that that makes the viewer going, why is that there? The florist looked at me like I was crazy when I said I need a flower for a photo project, but he gave me one of these, and then I went into my garage with a torch and found a spider that looked about right, suitably icky and leggy, and set them up, and 2 shots in realized that the composition was fantastic, but I was never going to get the depth of field to get the whole flower in shot. So I then accepted that I was going to have to do a bunch of what's called focus stacking, which I'd never done before. But hey, since I was diving into Lightroom, I thought into Photoshop, I thought I'd give it a go. And I think this was eventually 12 or 13 images deep to get the whole lot in. Reasonable amount of work to get the contrast across the flower just the way I liked it. The one critique, well, a couple of things I've got on it. The wall is more or less in focus. So I wish. Jess, you still there?
Sorry about that.
You're back.
I don't know what happened. I never got that error either. It just disconnected me. Okay, give me a second and I will pull that back up. Okay, so photo stacking, that was the last thing I heard from you.
Yeah, focus stacking. And then, so that was eventually, I think, a 12 or 13 image stack. Then processed it quite heavily to make sure I got that kind of fleshy light across the flower that I was looking for.
Okay.
In the black and whites, and just worked on the back of the flower and the stem to darken them off a bit. The one major critique I've got with this, which Hans Joachim pointed out, is that the wall is kind of in focus, and I wish now I'd gone back in the focus stack and brushed in one of the outer focus walls, but that would be going back to the files I've got in London, not here.
I can agree with that. That was definitely something that I was going to touch on. I think it'd definitely be stronger without pretty much any texture going on in the wall, or very, very little. There's a couple of things. For a first time attempt, I think it's phenomenal. And I love that you're stretching outside your limits and you're exploring other things that you're not familiar with. You know, that kind of fearlessness is what creates great artists. There's a little halos in certain places where the focus isn't quite matching up, specifically where I don't want to see it, which is right along this edge of the flower, and sort of haloing around him, because he's really the star of the image here. And this is the part where you go yell at everybody that was here before you got here, because I hate and am terrified of any kind of insect or arachnid, and everybody loses points when they bring photos of bugs to my critiques. So so that immediately knocks you down from 3 to 2 stars. Nice. However, I'm usually an advocate for color with flower photography because they have such amazing color. But here I think it works as black and white. I like the scale of size between the spider. He posed perfectly for you. You're still losing points off of him. I like the fact that it pops away from the background, even with the texture. I definitely think it would be stronger without any kind of wall texture. But we sort of go from this like darker kind of feel with the stem up to like this flower opening to the light, and the texture and the sharpness that we got with the feeling of the petals and all of these different gradations and variations of what a single petal has in terms of texture, and these sort of like mountains and valleys within them. I think that you captured beautifully, and I don't think that the florist could have picked a better photo for you, because it starts out really dark and then opens into the light and then recedes back into darkness with the stamens, which is all really helpful. And then that gets echoed with the shape of the spider and the darkness of his body as well, which makes him pop off of the background and off of the flower. But there's something, again, with those echoing shapes and repetitive kind of angles and curves. The way that the spider is standing really echoes the curvature of the flower petals too. So you get this really nice visually repeating sort of pattern going on in different elements, which I think makes it really strong. And even though we're now like looking into floral macro kind of photography, which is a far cry from architecture, you still have that element of, you know, the fly in the ointment, as you say, in the small, you know, small piece of life on a grander scale. And there's something very, very alluring about the idea that this little insect feels so small and minuscule and insignificant next to this giant flower, when this giant flower probably wouldn't even show up in some of your other images where it's the person that becomes the insect. So I like that dichotomy of it. And even though this is such a different genre from the rest of the content, I would totally still go, that's probably from the same artist. So I think you totally took the challenges that I gave you to create strong works that work together as a collection and a series, and ran with it. And that's amazing progress for how short of a time, because we just did your other critique, what, 2 weeks ago? So you definitely got what I was saying and ran with it and exceeded expectations. Honestly, I thought it'd take you a little longer to get into that. So well done. That means you totally weren't living up to potential, and I should have scored you lower for your first critique.
Oh, thanks very much.
You're welcome. No, you're doing really well, and I love that you're being bold, and I love that you're trying new things, because I don't think that we've even begun to really scratch the surface of what you're capable of yet, and what you're capable of and what you're showing is already really good. So I think you're going to see a lot of continued growth at a very high momentum this year moving forward, which I'm excited to watch.
Good. I'm really excited. Look, the challenge of even just identifying what it is that I want to photograph, and then trying to make those images, create those images rather than just snapping them as I stumbled across them, is a really, really good discipline. But it's also a really hard one, because, you know, with things like kind of the architectural shots, you just wait for that element to come in. You know, other disciplines, having that fly in the ointment is doable, but I think it becomes a lot harder. So if I'm doing, you know, not that portrait photography particularly appeals, but trying to get that kind of element in portrait photography, that pop, that what is going on, I think would be a lot of work to get happen. So in a sense, I'm kind of taking the easy path here.
I like it. I would be very interested to see you explore this whole fly in the ointment theory a little further, because I really love that your last image wasn't a small person up against a giant landscape or building. I love that you went, even though I don't like spiders, I love that you went sort of non-traditional and didn't follow it, but still followed the themes with it. So I would be very interested to see you continue to think outside the box with that as your main theme, and see what else you can do with that idea. And does it always have to be a living thing? Can you get that kind of quality with something else? Like maybe it's a flower or a weed in the middle of a giant street of concrete, you know? Does it have to be a creature, something living, something breathing at all, including plants, or where else can you find that kind of dichotomy? Because that sounds to me like the makings of a really interesting gallery show, which I would love to see from you in Sphere 2.
Nice.
So moving forward from that and getting critique, how are you feeling about what you're doing and your style, and where do you think the focus should be moving forward?
I know this is the first set of images I've created with that theme in mind. So I think trying to explore that further is definitely something I want to do. Like you said, how can I achieve that same kind of effect with it not being a person, not being architecture, you know, not being the flower, no more insects. I got that. It's a shame. I was looking around on eBay for like Goliath beetles and things I could add in, but I won't do that. I couldn't do that to you. Maybe that's personal work I won't show you.
No, I can take it for the sake of art. I can take it. Monica did one. She did like a series of 9, and she had like maggots coming out of her stomach in some of her self-portraits, and I still passed her. So it's okay. You know, there's one of my favorite quotes about art is that art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So even if I'm like the whole way through it, as long as you're making me have a reaction, it's a good image. It doesn't have to be a positive reaction to be a good image. It just has to make you feel something. So that will always get a reaction out of me.
Nice. Okay, I'll sneak one in here and there.
Yeah. You accidentally lose all your karma points. That's okay. So, okay. So moving forward, we're halfway through Sphere 1. We're getting ready to wind that down. Honestly, I don't think that you need another critique at this level. And I think I'm going to set that for everyone. I think one critique at the foundation level and one critique at Sphere 1 is enough to get you sort of situated, because now you're ready to start focusing. And I would really like you to move up to Sphere 2 so that we can really start getting into it, because you're at it. We're past the basics with you. You're ready to start moving. So I think you can put in, and if you want to do a critique at 19, we can do that, but it'll probably be short and sweet, and we'll just bang through the images. I would love to see you pick 5 images, and if we're still moving towards Photoshop, before and afters would be really good for you. I think,
Yeah.
like, I would love to see straight out a camera and then see what you can do with it. And bonus points if you pick an inspiration image that has some sort of technique or something that you love that you haven't figured out yet, like the focus stacking or stuff like this. And so we can sort of see the learning process, which I think will actually be really educational and helpful for your fellow apprentices as well that might be looking to learn the same things.
Okay. Well, there was one image I put in the selection of 10 yesterday, which didn't make the final cut, but it was one of the mosque at night, and I put in light streaks coming off the minarets into the sky, which was actually inspired by one of Trey's photos, where he had these towers of light with hard edges going up into the sky, which I've loved. And I thought, hey, can I get anywhere close to that? It's nowhere close, but so at least you can see there's an inspiration, and maybe trying to work on doing my own version of his processing could be a good one.
Okay, I like it. So go pick a couple of images or pick one and bring 5 attempts at it, because you shouldn't get it the first time, but you should be able to leave from each failure and go, well, I learned that doesn't work. And I learned that this technique did get me closer. And so it'd be interesting too. Like, I'd be really interested to see a single image that you take that has the potential to mimic something you're learning, and see 5 images that are your first 5 attempts to keep going. And critiquing it. That would be a really good challenge for you too. But I definitely think that you're resting right now on talent and knowledge, and I'd like to see you push really hard now, because now I know what you're capable of. So I'm going to be yelling at you all the time to do more. That's what you get for showing off.
Not showing off, but very, very pleased you like some of these images.
Good, good. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to chat about or that you wanted to bring to attention while you had my time?
No, I think the only other thing I'd say is going through these images, I was also trying to see what process, is there a basic processing style, a preset that I naturally like in my images. And one of the things when I was reviewing my favorites in others is there's always a kind of often a blue theme or a blue tinge to them. And I've been in the set you've seen now, they actually all have a very pale blue split toning, both highlights. But then I tweak up the color a little, so it gets the warmth back in. But it just seems to richen everything up, and it's in a way that I like. Maybe it won't work for absolutely every image, but stylistically, if that's something that it could be a signature, I want to explore that as well.
I'm totally okay with that, and it's probably very likely that you'll have more than one thing. Like, I don't think it'll be like he's the fly in the ointment photographer, or he does these like little living spirits in these great expansive places, or he's the cool tone kind of person. But I think that we'll start to see themes where it's like it's a couple of images where it's the fly in the ointment kind of thing, and then it'll flow in and we'll go, oh, there's a lot of blue tones. And then when you move away from that, like you did with the image of the castle behind the town, there was still that blue element. So visually you can follow the line of thought. So there's probably going to be 3 or 4 different themes that'll start to emerge for you. And the more that you work and the more that you look at your work and get feedback, you'll start to see them. But there'll be several themes that'll sort of undulate under the context of the image. And I think the fact that in 2 weeks that you sort of figured out what 2 of the major ones are is really, really good. So,
right.
Yeah, definitely keep exploring. Good. All right, so we got a little bit behind because Google sucks. So I'm going to head out to the next critique. If you think of anything that we didn't get to chat about, just drop me a line in the meantime. Otherwise, I will see you soon.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Julian. Bye.